going to be. And I thought it was going to be pretty good because, as many of you know, I've been stumping hard for DeMeco Ryans. And he killed it. He crushed it. We've watched a lot of nonsense over the last few years at various times from the Houston Texans. And DeMeco Ryans just showed exactly why everybody thinks as highly of him as they do. And I thought the really cool thing, and honestly the takeaway that I didn't expect, was how comfortable and loose Nick Caserio was. Nick Caserio looked like he felt like he finally had a football coach, like he finally had somebody that he really vibed with and connected with. And I don't think I've seen Caserio quite that loose, and that is a statement on DeMeco. I think that it's hard to describe sometimes because I think people are appropriately skeptical. When you start telling people about somebody like DeMeco, there's a natural skepticism that sets in because we've heard this before about guys that have the it factor, or guys that just connect with people, or guys who are natural leaders of men. And all I can tell you is like, no, you gotta understand that is him. There were a few moments, honestly, where I got almost a little bit emotional because I felt this sense of like pride for DeMeco and thoughts back to when he was a rookie and how he has progressed, to where it's not a surprise to anybody, but it's still a huge progression for any young man to go from a young guy to what he obviously is now, which is every bit the part of an NFL head coach. The part that I really liked and I think maybe showed the real essence of DeMeco was when he was talking about what he likes about coaching, how he decided to get into coaching. He told a few different stories. But I think when he was talking about working with Brian Cushing, when Brian Cushing first got here, that his whole mindset was, hey, here's this young guy, Brian Cushing, coming in. And, a lot of guys could look at that as a threat or something. But DeMeco's mindset with younger guys like Cushing here, Jordan Hicks in Philadelphia, has always been, hey, the more I can help this guy out, I'm going to pour all of myself into this guy and help him be the best player he can be. And then the team will be better, and then I'll be better. But the focus always needs to be on other people. And he told a story about Fred Warner, who's one of the very best linebackers in the league, but was a third-round pick in San Francisco. That was DeMeco's first year in San Francisco, and he did the same thing with Fred Warner. And Fred Warner turned into something much, much more than people thought he could be. Because I think DeMeco saw that in him and helped him work through it. So those things, those kinds of, those intangibles, they're really hard to describe, but I think a lot of you that were able to watch the press conference maybe saw some of that, just how focused he is on other people and how committed he is to just being a good teacher and then teaching the teachers, which are his assistant coaches. Few things about this. I think that Caserio, being as loose and kind of joking and lively as he was, I feel 100% confident that none of that was fake, and that as Caserio told the story, Caserio spoke before DeMeco. It was first Cal, then Caserio, then DeMeco, and at one point, I think this was the second time Caserio spoke, he talked about the first interview they had with DeMeco, and DeMeco just laid it out and said, hey, I want to be there. This is what I'm working for. I want to be in Houston. And then this was funny the way Caserio told it, but then the rules were that they couldn't talk to DeMeco after that. So it honestly sounded like a romantic movie or something, where you have a special exchange with somebody, a moment, and then all of a sudden you're not allowed to talk to them again, and you just have to sit. And I could see Caserio maybe like sitting at home on his bed, thinking about DeMeco and all the good times they could have. It sounded like Caserio was smitten by DeMeco Ryans, and it sounded like between Cal and Nick that they felt really good about it, but they had to wait a week until the playoffs were over to be able to talk to DeMeco again. I can imagine if they'd had to go to the Super Bowl, they would have been able to talk this week. But so that part was really cool. I think that Nick and DeMeco are going to get along perfectly. I don't think there's going to be one issue above and beyond the normal issues that GMs and coaches have together. I think Baltimore has always been a good example, especially, I don't know about the new guy as much as Ozzie Newsome, but Ozzie Newsome had productive conflict with his coaches, where guys, you respect each other, like arguing with a brother or a business partner or anybody else like that. You're going to have disagreements. That's why it's a partnership. But these two guys are both so singularly focused on keeping the bigger picture in mind, and you could just feel it when they were on stage together. And I think it was also, confirmation that, man, yeah, these last 2 years were a hard reset. It wasn't an outright tank, because I don't think that philosophically the team believes in that. And that's even with the analytical types, that's starting to be more of the trend, not just in football, but basketball. But a reset where you're going to go through some hard times. And now that it feels like, okay, these guys are a real football team again. Like, it feels like they're going to go. Honestly, I wanted to go play football. Like, I was so excited. DeMeco, and this is the other thought that I've had about DeMeco this entire time, because you guys that know me know I can be skeptical of things. I can be cynical at times. I'm a bastard about some things. There have been a few guys on teams on which I played throughout the years where I just felt like, man, I wish I could be more like that guy. I wish I could emulate. I need to emulate that guy. In high school, college, the NFL, there are a few guys like that. And one of them was a linebacker who is a year younger than me at Cornell. His name was Jeff Stenstrom. His older brother was Steve Stenstrom, the quarterback at Stanford from back in the day. And he passed away his freshman year. But it was one of those kids, kind of like DeMeco, because DeMeco was a rookie when I was a 10th year veteran. Those guys like that, like DeMeco, like Jeff Stenstrom, you watch them operate and you see like how it's like the football equivalent of a saint. Like they just do everything the right way. And they are such badasses. It seems like linebackers for some reason. The way Belichick talks about Teddy Bruschi. Such badasses, and yet also have this capacity to care so much about their teammates and to do things by the rules and to do all these things. And that doesn't always translate beyond football. It totally translates with DeMeco Ryans, because you see what people say about him, you hear what people say about him, and they very much, he's very much the real deal. I think genuine, authentic, words that haven't necessarily been used by everybody in the front office over the past couple of years. He's the opposite of some of the things that needed to be purged from this organization. So I'm sitting up here in one of the media booths at NRG Stadium. There's a party for the players, the former players, down in the locker room that I'm going to get to after this. I'm going to hang out with you guys for a while longer. And I find myself as happy as I've been with this team and this organization since back in 2011. And I feel really, really good about it. I'm not predicting greatness for this particular season or anything. We'll see how it goes. I know that the adversity is going to be a lot easier to bear with DeMeco Ryans as the head coach, however long that adversity might last, and I think we're going to build. He talked specifically a couple times. There are some current players in the room. There are maybe 10 current players in the room and about 30 former players in the room. I got to hang out with Whitney Merciless a while. I sat next to Whitney and talked to him. So John Weeks. Okay, real quick. Funny thing was at the end of the session, they had all the current players come up and take a picture with DeMeco, and a bunch of us sitting down, a bunch of the old guys, looked at Weeks and we were like, what's Weeks going up for? Oh, yeah. He's still playing. So Weeks stayed up for the picture with all the old guys, too. So that was funny. Brian Cushing still looks like he could murder a moose with his bare hands. So that was cool. And he was a very popular person there. I can't even remember why I started this other than, the players that were there. Derek Stingley, he specifically mentioned Derek Stingley. He mentioned Jalen Petrie. He mentioned another couple guys, but it's hard not to get excited when he started addressing the current players in the room and talking about what he sees for them and what their potential is. And I think those guys felt it too. I think those guys, you could get this sense of guys being excited about all of this. I think I had some notes in here about, let's get Stroud or Johnson to go with Pierce and Metchie. I'm cool with that. That'd be fine. Okay, a couple of the buzzwords that he had. Swarm. And I've read this before, but it was cool to hear him say, this is like coach speak stuff when you start getting into the acronyms a little bit. But he started out as talking about something that he very much believes in, and you see it in his defense. The SWARM acronym, SWARM, Special Work special work ethic, relentless mindset. That's the way he wants his guys to play. And as Justin Key says, Swarm was on his play sheet in San Francisco. And he took special care to say that that's what he wants out of his offense too. And he wants to win at the line of scrimmage. You know, he spoke kind of vaguely about what he wants, but this was good. When he started answering questions about the offense, he didn't speak about specifics, but in answering a question about his offense and then also in a question about his coaching influences, this was really exciting. Because I've told you guys, DeMeco is a guy who studies offense, not just as a defensive player, but he wants to know what the offensive coaches are doing, what the quarterback is doing, getting into the psychology and the strategy of it all. And I really I've been so stuck in my brain on Kubshanistan that I needed somebody from the Kubiak-Shanahan system. And Daniel Mason, I'm going to answer your question a little bit because I think it's based on a false premise. So he spoke about learning from Andy Reid and Chip Kelly. And honestly, that's an angle I think I've neglected somewhat. But when he was in Philadelphia, between Andy Reid and Chip Kelly, he learned a whole lot of a different style of football than Kubshanistan. But he also talked about Chip Kelly and being on the cutting edge of things, that Chip Kelly was just constantly looking for that edge, either on the sports science side of things. Remember, they made a big deal about the shakes and everything. So like that's another part where he's going to vibe. The question about whether Nick can suppress his ego enough, I honestly, I guess I understand where that comes from. Personally, I haven't seen it. I think that, and again, I don't know if you watched the press conference or not. The person that asked that question, it's popping off my phone right now, so I can't see it. He was as loose as we've seen him. He was as comfortable as we've seen him. Nick Caserio was, and I think that was the presence of DeMeco Ryan's. As far as Nick Caserio's ego, look, after this last several days, and then especially after that press conference, I've never been more convinced that these last 2 years were a concerted effort to maybe develop some talent and identify some young players, but while also doing a hard reset on the season. The unfortunate thing is the Texans had painted themselves into this corner where they couldn't just hire any old dude and not have it be a huge controversy. So the hiring of the coaches, between past allegations about the way the organization operates, the Deshaun Watson scenario, everything, it got 10 times worse than a normal hard reset. And I think that just like the beginning of anything arduous, whether it's wind sprints, moving, or having a catheter inserted, it's always worse than you expect it. And I think that's what these last 2 years have been. And I think that Caserio made the coaching hires that he did. I think the Culley one was a huge mistake. I think Lovie Smith, if he had made a hire like that and it lasted 2 years, then it would have been a lot more respectable. The Culley was a big mistake, and I think Ryan Clark and Marcus Spears spoke really well on that when they talked about how players in the locker room can sense when the coach at the front of the room is not a long timer. He's not meant to be there long, because you think about with Culley, especially when Justin Reed, when Laramie Tunsil, when some of these guys were having issues with the organization, I think a lot of that just stems right back to knowing what the deal is with the guy up at the front. So Caserio's ego or need for control, I honestly am not one bit concerned about that. I think that it was a necessity for Caserio to have a certain amount of control over, especially the Culley situation. And then for Lovie Smith, which was a very weird, backed into a corner hire to begin with too. So short answer, no, I'm not worried about it. I guess, so to answer your question, I don't think Nick has an ego to suppress. I think that Nick and DeMeco are very much cut from the same cloth when it comes to this, because they're different in a lot of respects. But they are very focused on the actual goal. And a lot of coaches, a lot of managers, a lot of people in life aren't necessarily focused on the things that they should be focused on. I think that Caserio and DeMeco, and the way, I guess, if you could see the way Caserio was almost just gushing about DeMeco Ryan's, it was really cool to see. It was a side of Nick Caserio, who we'll have on at 7:30 tomorrow morning on 6:10 a.m. We'll have him at 7:30 Central. So go ahead and get your Odyssey app and stream and everything, because we'll have Nick Caserio on at 7:30. And somebody had just asked a question about DeMeco and whether he's going to call plays. He was asked whether he would call plays. Matt Musil asked a very long question. I'm going to talk to Matt about this. We prefaced it with a whole lot of things, but he basically asked, "Are you going to call plays?" And we don't know yet. That's something that DeMeco said that they were discussing. I personally am hoping that he has a couple older guys on the staff. That was another really good thing DeMeco talked about. How he likes to have different types of coaches on the staff. So we talked about diversity in terms of experience, history in football, perspectives. And he said the reason he likes that mainly is because different guys learn different ways. Like he sees the whole picture. Like he just gets it. Like so he's talking about what kind of staff he has, and obviously he's not going to speak into any specifics, but he's talking about, like, look, we've got different guys on this team that need to learn. Everybody has different learning styles. The more different types of guys you have coaching them, the more resources you have to coach them. And he spoke about that multiple times. He got into coaching to help players, like helping players. That's what he, let's see, when you pick David Culley over Jim Caldwell, you go, what? I knew Culley was a one and done. I also wonder if Caldwell, this is another good thing Marcus Spears said. I'm going to have to do a reaction video to the Inside the NFL segment from yesterday, because I thought those guys, Ryan Clark, Marcus Spears, Teddy Bruschi, really understood the situation better than a lot of the other national pundits or Emmanuel Acho or other people that are speaking on it. They kind of talked about basically those guys being hired to be fired, and that they probably knew it getting into it, and they got nice paydays out of it. But man, that is a rough job. That's a whole lot of crap you got to take to just stay the course. And hopefully, ultimately, it's all worth it in the long run for the organization. But those guys also got nice guaranteed paydays out of it. I think, and again, with all of these things with the Texans, there's also a history that preceded that Cal McNair is working his butt off to try to always be a better person moving forward, and like not to atone for anything else or anything, but whatever. Okay, so that was a phrase used a lot. The swarm mentality was big. The development and delivery of men. I thought that was a cool. DeMeco has a way of using a little bit of coach speak here, but because you can tell his whole ethos is guided by actually helping players, then it feels that much better. And, I'm sure we'll get sick of some of the things, but he's like, the words genuine and authentic come up so often when you talk to people about DeMeco. And it was also really cool to be able to sit next to some of the guys that played with DeMeco. I sat next to Whitney, but Whitney was drafted in 2012. He knows DeMeco, but DeMeco is gone, but, still at his home here and everything. So a lot of those guys that just know DeMeco, not even from being teammates, but that just know him from being in Houston. It was cool to see those guys too. Let's see. Cal and Nick. Nick said, "What did we like? Everything." and he really, I can't tell you. If you guys haven't seen the press conference yet, Nick was positively gushing, like in a way that I didn't think Nick was capable of. This was the first time I saw, wow, this is a real human boy. This is not a marionette or something. This is an actual human being. And I'm so excited to talk to him on Sports Radio 610 tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning, because I think he feels like he can finally get down to business. I think, and DeMeco said that too. DeMeco said, man, I just can't wait to start coaching. I can't wait to get into this, to dive into it. He handled just about everything as well as he could, I think. He made special mention that, hey, we have a quarterback on the roster. And that was in response to a question about San Francisco, where, obviously they've had to make do without their first, second, third, or fourth choice at quarterback. They played with a quarterback with one hand the other day. And what did he say? He said about that, I wrote it down. That's what he said. He says, so what happens when your quarterbacks go down? Are we just booking it? And it's like, no, you're not booking it. You're going for it. I want to play football right now. My knees feel better for the moment. I don't know. We'll see. DeMeco on the offensive staff, because again, Okay, big question. I'm a big proponent of Kubshanistan. Anybody from the Kubiak-Shanahan tree, I do believe that because you can find so many of those coaches that are schooled in that system, it's easier for your young quarterback if your offensive coordinator gets plucked away, that you can find somebody from that system. But after hearing DeMeco talk about having played for Andy Reid and learned from Andy Reid, and having played for Chip Kelly and learned from Chip Kelly, that I'm way more open and flexible on that now. And I think honestly, I feel like I've been out there screaming at everybody like, no, DeMeco understands offense. He's been studying this his whole life, not just as a linebacker, but like as a guy that wants to understand how offensive coaches operate. But I feel like I might have even been underselling him in just the exposure that he's had to different types of people. Mentioned the QB. Oh, no energy vampires. That's more coach speak, but I love it. You don't want to be an energy vampire. Let's see. Joseph said he basically said, yeah, we were going to use Stingley properly. I guess, did he say it that way? I think he got excited about using Stingley. And you know, that's one thing that DeMeco has done a very good job of that I don't think he gets enough credit for, is it's easy to look at some of the studs on that 49ers defense and think, well, they got Bosa and they got Fred Warner and they got all these other guys. Look, Fred Warner was a third-round pick that DeMeco himself coached as a linebackers coach. And you fully credit Fred Warner for becoming the player that he did. But Rick says Seth Payne for Waterboy. But DeMeco had something to do with it. And if you look at last year when the defense had some struggles but ended up being a very good defense last year, they could not cover man at all. This year, they had to cover up for one of their cornerbacks, Lenore. Hufungo was a young guy that's not a perfect player, but he's turned into an awesome player. Like he had, as a prospect, Hufunga had some issues and limitations, and DeMeco has figured out how to use him properly. And I think they got very much the most out of Shavarius Ward, especially when I've watched I broke down a few 49ers games this year. The intelligence with which their secondary plays and the discipline with which they play was really impressive to me. I think there were a lot of ways that San Francisco defense could have been exploited that I'm thinking that DeMeco may have been nervous about. Like every week going into games, he did a masterful job of cloaking, disguising things, and protecting some of those weaknesses, which is what just smart, strategic people do. Okay. Another time I got really excited. Yes, Jerry says Christian Harris has to be pumped. He has to be super pumped. So, and I wonder if DeMeco might bring Johnny Holland, who was his linebackers coach here in Houston, who was also a linebackers coach on his staff in San Francisco. I wonder if he might bring him along. That makes me feel better about maybe Fred Warner getting the same kind of coaching and tutelage that DeMeco did. But where you could see some of the influence and where I get excited when it comes to DeMeco being an influence on the offense, not just the defense, was when Caserio was talking about the conversations he's had with DeMeco about using deception to make simple things look more complex. And that is a hallmark of very good defense, and especially in the modern NFL where disguising coverages and disguising blitzes, that is key and paramount. That's the complexity of defense a lot of times, is just not giving the smart quarterbacks a clue what you're doing and then unleashing it with the proper timing. DeMeco does that on defense very well. When they blitz, and they didn't blitz a lot this last year, when they blitzed, guys like Hufunga and some of those linebackers, they timed it perfectly. And they didn't show, I looked for tells, and they didn't show the blitzes were coming, and that's why they were so effective. On offense, especially with Kubshanistan, that's the whole deal. You do a few simple things really, really well, but you use a whole lot of deception. You make them all look the same. It's sleight of hand, but with 11 guys on football. The quarterback, like there's none of this Deshaun Watson acting like he had a good game because he threw for 350 yards and a couple of touchdowns, but meanwhile they didn't score any freaking points. Like there's none of that, because the quarterback is responsible for the run game. The quarterback is responsible for obviously the passing game. The wide receivers care about the run blocking, all of that. Like that stuff is ingrained in DeMeco, and the deception part, the deception that you yield from that is a core part of both offensive and defensive football. And it was cool to think about DeMeco and those guys talking and thinking about that. And I'm really excited about that. Another thing Nick Caserio said about DeMeco I believe he said that there were 8 traits. You guys watching the press conference, if you watched it, because I was trying not to be rude because it's DeMeco up there talking, but I have my phone and I'm trying to take notes, and it's a football coach up there. I get nervous, even though he's much younger than me. I get nervous when DeMeco is talking, and if he sees me on my phone, that he might call me out in front of everybody. But Caserio, I believe, said they look for 8 traits in a coach. And a lot of that is more on the personal side of things, And I think in a really weird way, the analogy I made the other day was this, and talking about how Josh McCown may have, in a weird and awkward way, led to where we are right now, but also given a clue as to Caserio thinking about the head coach position differently than a lot of people do. And I know a lot of you are understandably wrapped up in offensive coach versus defensive coach. Most coaches that are hired in the NFL are just not actually good leaders. They have technical expertise on one side of the ball, and maybe they're really, really good at it, but those things often have almost nothing to do with being an NFL head coach. And I think that Caserio, in studying this over the years, has figured that out, and he's looked for traits, personality traits, perhaps objective reports from others, which you have a lot of. When you look at a former quarterback like Josh McCown, or if you look at a former player like DeMeco Ryan's, you have objective reports from other people with no skin in the game about what this guy is like as a person. And that's hard to get. It's hard to get in coaching. So I think that with all that information, I think that what Caserio and Easterby, because Easterby left some good things. He did so many weird things, but he did some good things. I think that they were looking at hiring coaches based on way more than just their level of expertise as an offensive or defensive coordinator. They were looking at a lot of personality traits, a lot of objective reports from others. And I think Josh McCown, who sounds like an incredible dude, but unfortunately has never shown an actual desire to coach football full time. That's kind of a big deal. That's my number one prerequisite. You guys know that. The number one prerequisite to being a good football coach is to have a burning desire to coach. Like, you just can't help it. You can't stop thinking about it. So if you don't have that and you don't prove it by coming in and working at a low-level quality control type job like DeMeco did, then you don't really know if that's what you want to do or not. So, maybe with McCown, they figured, all right, listen, we're in this reset/tank anyway. Let's just go ahead and see what happens. And if it works, then awesome. But if not, no big deal. So maybe that's an offshoot of where it was. But it felt a little bit like being on the cutting edge of something, and then because of the influence perhaps of whatever, just trying to think too far outside the box, it'd be like if Daryl Morey came in, and instead of just saying, hey, we're going to shoot more three-pointers than anybody else, if he came in and said, we're going to shoot nothing but three-pointers. That's it. Threes all over. Guys aren't allowed to do layups anymore. I know they're high efficiency too, but we're going to do nothing but threes. It's just taking a good idea to the extreme, and that's what I think Josh McCown was. So what you have now, thank God, you have those same personality traits of a Josh McCown, except with actual proven success as a coordinator as well. And I'm trying, honestly, I'll say it again. I am a cynical, I am always skeptical of things. I second guess my own emotions. I want to be sure that I'm not being led astray by bias or anything like that. But I am telling you, this is a unique human being. This is a unique coach. This is a different guy than your typical offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, whoever the hell that other teams are hiring. And it's only, and DeMeco would be the first to tell you, because I wrote this down too, as one of the last things he said, it's all about collaboration. It's all about collaboration. And I believe that 100% with my soul, that in the NFL, it's never about just the head coach. It's never about the general manager. It's never about the owners, the ownership group, because I see Hannah McNair is getting a lot of love on here, and rightfully so. Hannah McNair is becoming like a folk hero in the city of Houston. So I think that everything feels right. This is the best I've felt about the way the Texans feel in a long, long time. And I was really excited about it. I know a bunch more people have joined since I last talked about this, so I'll reiterate it, and the people that have heard it already, I don't think are going to mind hearing this. This was very apparent right from the beginning that this is the loosest and most comfortable and maybe most himself that Nick Caserio has been since he's gotten here. I've never seen this side of Nick Caserio where for anybody that was nervous about how he and DeMeco would get along, there was zero faking it up there. Like, if you're going to ask me whether do any of you think that Nick Caserio would be a good actor if he were faking being loose and comfortable and actually liking somebody? Of course not. So, like, I don't think he has the capacity to fake something like that. I frankly didn't know he had the capacity to have those actual emotions where he was up there, he was free, he was loose. It felt kind of like, it felt like, when you meet somebody at a party or a bar or a restaurant or church, wherever, and you just vibe with them and you just connect and you're like, oh, this guy is all right. I like this guy. And then you start to wonder, like, gosh, I hope I don't want to come on too strong. I just like this guy. That episode of King of the Hill, when Hank just vibed with that dude, where they would just sit around and not say anything, and the other friends started to get jealous. That was, it kind of felt like that. It felt like those two guys vibed. Doctor said, I think Nick is relieved he doesn't have to be the babysitter anymore. Yeah, he can probably get back to just working on football. I honestly, without anybody like being over the top or going way too far, did we just become best friends? About anything, like the press conference is a press conference. Many press conferences that start off awesome end up disastrous coaching stints. Many disastrous press conferences like Nick Sirianni work out all right in the end. But I think the difference is that I, as well as many, many, many other people, know and understand how DeMeco Ryan's operates, and this is the real deal. Like, I'm glad that a lot of you guys finally got to see it, and especially after, this had the capacity to be a good press conference where, wow, it felt good, but it just felt good in the way that your head feels better when you stop banging it against the wall. I almost feel like you could have put an accountant up there and called him a football coach, and as long as he didn't screw it up too bad, you'd be like, all right, we're on the right track. But as Sahib says, been a long time since I've felt this optimistic about the Texans. The energy is refreshing. I was thinking about this the other day, when it's unlikely that we'll win 10 straight Super Bowls in a row. It's possible, of course. Probable, maybe, but it's not a slam dunk guarantee. So there's always adversity along the way. I think that it feels like the McNairs, in a winding, twisting way over the course of 20 years. It feels in many ways like if the Texans can put together a stretch here at some point, it feels like a part of the city, like it's part of the fabric of the city in a way that maybe it wasn't before. Maybe it was too corporate or whatever it was. Just I like little things like Cal and Hannah. Yeah, we should just call them Hal, shouldn't we? Like a power couple, Hal. Hal and Canna throwing the H's up and everything, and like doing all this stuff. Which, right? Okay, that's something they thought about, obviously, but it comes from a genuine place of like Cal. Look, Cal grew up here. Cal spent most of his the important years here. He played football in high school here. He played football at Texas. It feels like that's something that's very important to them, and I'll give them credit for seeing it through a lot of really like opening himself up to ridicule in a lot of ways that he didn't have to. I think during training camp when he's out there and just putting his face out there and being the face of the team when he knew that the criticism would be harsh, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. The players that were there that I got to see, some of the former Texans players, it was really cool to see their response too. Some of those guys had spent a lot more time with DeMeco than I did as an older player. I was in my last year in the NFL when DeMeco was a rookie, and you could just tell instantly that this is a guy that I want to be like this guy. I need to be more like DeMeco moving forward in my life, is what I was saying when I was 32 years old and DeMeco was a 22-year-old rookie. Another thing Caserio said was after they got off the phone with DeMeco, Nick said, "Holy cow, let's go play football tomorrow." Like he has that effect on you. And Carlos says, "I'm sorry guys, I'm so excited I can't even put my thoughts into the right words to send out. I missed your first one, so I don't. No worries, Carlos. I didn't see the first one. Not sure if he's going to call plays. Nick said, hey guys, go look and see how many undrafted players or guys who weren't drafted in top rounds there are on the 49ers team." I can't remember. I didn't catch exactly what context he put it, but I do think it's important to point out, and Nick was pointing out, hey, that defense has some studs on it, But some of those studs are also guys that coaching staff in San Francisco helped mold into the studs they are. They're not all top 5 draft picks like Nick Bosa. They've got some self-made dudes out there, and you credit those guys with the coaching staff for that. And I think that's one of the things that impressed them about DeMeco. Somebody else asked DeMeco I think it was John McClain asked how close he had gotten to signing with Denver. And DeMeco didn't answer it directly, other than he didn't necessarily address Denver directly, other than saying some nice things about him. But he just very emphatically said, this is where I wanted to be. The sense I got from how Nick said the interview went, which is Nick said that DeMeco just flat out said, I want to be there. Dude, he just said, I just want to be there. He didn't open up the door. It was a stupid business thing to do for DeMeco. I think, this is how genuine he is. And this is the cool thing too, because I think I can almost sense this in the way that it's talked about, where some people outside of Houston, or maybe that don't know DeMeco, will say things almost like, well, gosh, if he's so good and he's forced to take that job in Houston. I think that what they do is they misinterpret kindness for weakness. And I think, in DeMeco, there's one thing I was talking to my wife, Brandy, about it the other day. He just has such a nice smile. He has a very likable quality to him. I think some people think he's like some naive hayseed or something, which couldn't be further from the truth. I think he's a guy that I think he was a dad. He had the maturity of a dad or a grandfather when he was 14 years old. He just seems like that kind of a guy. And he knew full well what he was going into. I think he knew full well that he could potentially be losing bargaining power by just flat out laying it out and saying, hey, I want to be there. But that's what he wanted, and that's what he got. And it just, the fact that Caserio, who so many people were skeptical that Caserio would want to bring DeMeco in because it might be a threat to him somehow. Guys, Caserio was just flat out. Caserio just was flat out basically said, it sounded like he was sold the minute that DeMeco got off the Zoom call. And I can't imagine, from going from a guy like Sean Payton, who apparently was insulted that he had to do this thing on Zoom or something, to somebody like DeMeco, who's fresh-faced with enthusiasm and wants to come and build something and feels like this is a dream come true for him to be in this position. I said it on the radio this morning. You guys we're going to have Caserio on at 7:30 tomorrow morning. I'm all in, man. I stumped for DeMeco. I threw all the weight of anything I had into saying that they should hire DeMeco. And, ultimately that's not what they're making the decision based off of, obviously. But I tried to be as loud a voice as possible these last couple of weeks in favor of DeMeco. And I'll leave my radio job if it doesn't work out with DeMeco. And I love my job. I absolutely 100% love my job. I don't know what I'll do for poor Sean Pendergast, but the fact of the matter is I don't expect to have to do that. I think that that's how strongly I feel about this. And I do think that whatever adversity there is this year, where you're still a young roster and you still have a long way to go in terms of being a genuine championship football team, I think it's going to be evident that things continue to get better. I also think, in a weird way, I felt like Caserio got an endorsement from Marcus Spears on Inside the NFL the other day, because Marcus Spears, Ryan Clark, and Teddy Bruschi, I think, spoke very intelligently about the situation here in Houston. I think that they showed a certain understanding of things. Well, they were getting their shots in, and I was like, I had to sit back and take it, because some of them are deserved. They were getting their shots in, but they were leaving open this avenue to improve. And they understood that hiring DeMeco and giving him a 6-year deal and showing him a genuine commitment was that actual commitment to improve. That the Texans as an organization have this commitment to be a different team moving forward. So what Marcus Spears said, and it was cool to see, and this got me pumped up too. I have to play this tomorrow. Marcus Spears said, hey, I know a lot of you guys don't watch Houston play. These guys play their butts off. They play their asses off, and they took it down to the wire with Kansas City, with Dallas. They played above their weight class a few times this year, and it was down at the end of the season. They won that last damn stupid game, which I've got something to say about it. I want to defend Lovie Smith for winning that game. But I think that part is true, and I think that's a notch in favor of Nick Caserio, because one thing that I felt about this year's draft class, and really the last couple classes, but maybe this one in particular, it felt like DeMeco Ryan once had 25 tackles in a game versus Arkansas. What the hell? 25 tackles. It felt like they had more dog in them. Like they felt like badass football players this year. Guys like Christian Harris and, John Metchie, when he gets out on the field, that's what everybody says about him. There's a difference between being a high character guy and a high football character guy. And it feels like they really identified high football. Dameon Pierce? You kidding me? Like can you imagine Dameon Pierce and DeMeco Ryans are so made for each other. They are, oh my gosh. They're just going to love each other. Even more so. I know people said it could never happen, but I think even more so than Nick Caserio loves DeMeco Ryans, I feel like Dameon Pierce might love him even more. Those two will probably get in arguments about it. You'll see Dameon Pierce and Nick Caserio having a heated conversation on the sideline, and they'll ask Dameon Pierce about it afterwards, and he'll be like, I don't know, I feel like I'm DeMeco's BFF, and I just don't feel like Caserio should be wearing that bracelet that he made for himself. DeMeco didn't even give him that BFF bracelet. I'm DeMeco's BFF. So that part of it's cool, and I do think that these guys are gonna be okay. Like whatever you felt about Caserio, go watch this press conference and watch how enthusiastically on DeMeco's side I think Nick Caserio is. And the other thing to know and understand about these guys. DeMeco can handle adversity. Boom, we know that. I think sometimes we think about the New England Patriots, and it's too convenient to kind of just create these own narratives, and everybody's got their own theory and philosophy about New England. But as much success as they've had, they also have had a lot of adversity along the way. Some of it self-inflicted, some of it either deflation related or video camera related or whatever, but it is adversity. And I asked Nick about that once. Nick actually, I'd asked him a question about dealing with adversity and being on bad teams. Nick said, we didn't lose a lot, but we did have our share of adversity. And he kind of, chuckled at it. And that part is true. There's a certain flexibility that it takes to make it through those things while keeping your core beliefs intact. And I think that Nick's experience at New England actually probably provided him with a different perspective, but also a very good understanding on how to handle adversity successfully. I think sometimes we think of adversity and we think, well, of course it comes with a losing season. Some of the best seasons come with the most adversity. Look at San Francisco this year. If Brock Purdy hadn't gotten his hand hit, if Kyle Shanahan hadn't curiously tried to block the second, maybe the best, Hassan Reddick with a tight end with the rookie guy. I don't know. Let's see. Seth, who do you think Nico or Houston takes at number 2? Bryce, Stroud, or Levis? Okay. I don't know. We'll have a lot of fun talking about that. But I'm glad you asked that question. There was another really good story that DeMeco told, and it shined a light on him thinking about being a head coach, and his total and understanding is, as he said, it's always about a collaboration. It's all about collaboration is what he's said a couple times. And it was this, that he, son of a bitch. Okay, so when he was a young linebackers coach, they were sitting in the draft, and there were a couple linebackers that he really, really wanted. And he liked these guys, but they were debating whether or not to take a running back or a linebacker, and they put up the highlight film of Elijah Mitchell. And he said he had to think about it and realize, okay, I really want a linebacker, but that's being selfish because I want a linebacker. That Elijah Mitchell can help this football team. And he just flat out told Kyle, like, take the running back. And that's something you need, obviously, as a head coach, is to be able to see that side of it. I think he also saw, look, he was a second-round pick by Gary Kubiak, an offensive coach who came in and drafted not Reggie Bush, but Mario Williams. And then with his second pick, he drafted one DeMeco Ryans, young linebacker out of a pre-Nick Saban Alabama, who once had 25 tackles versus Arkansas, I'm told. Let's see, no energy vampire, no egos. That's another thing he said. And I know there was the question earlier about, hey, somebody asked whether Nick would be able to, I don't know if I'm supposed to be up here, by the way. If I get locked inside NRG Stadium, the monster truck rally track is down there. Maybe I'll go run the monster truck track if I get locked out. I don't think I'm going to, because there's a party for the former players downstairs that I was invited to that maybe I've missed by now. So no ego. He just flat out said no egos, and I do think that when I think of Nick, for whatever reason why he's gotten this reputation of having an ego, and I think a lot of it is almost just based on the headset stuff, or the fact that he hired Culley, which looks like the classic. That did look, if you weren't trying to tank or do a hard reset, that looks like a classic manager who wants to hire somebody who's perhaps not as competent, because then it makes you look better. I feel a whole lot better about any chance of that being the case after this press conference. I think it was very, very clear that we just spent 2 years just in kind of a purgatory, and that we've moved beyond that. Somebody asked how many former players were there. I would say, boy, the meeting room is nice. They got rid of some of the desks and everything. It was a nice big, it felt like I was at one of those fancy movie theaters where they serve you. I told Vandermeer to go get me a drink, and he didn't. So let's see, there's 5, there are probably 30 former players. There's a picture out there if you go to the Texans website or their social media. I think they tweeted it out. So there were probably at least 30 former players. I think there were about 10 current players. A lot of people from the building that are really super excited about DeMeco being there. And honestly, like, I already knew who DeMeco was. I feel like I got a glimpse of the real and actual Nick Caserio for the first time. It was really cool. It was really cool. As far as some of the former players that were there, this is the thing that's starting to annoy me. Cushing and Kevin Walter look as physically impressive and imposing as they ever have, and it disgusts me because they're middle-aged. And Cushing, dude, you don't want to mess with Cushing, man. That dude, he looks like a certified badass. He's got, the cool short hair on the side, haircut, like the big faux hawk type deal, and he's all muscled up, and he does MMA now and everything. He looks like he could concuss an alligator, like, without breaking a sweat. So that's I spent most of the press conference looking at Cushing. So that's pretty just what I did. So it was cool. He was cool with it, probably. I don't know. I took some pictures. But a lot of those guys were there. Andre Johnson was there, obviously. It felt Andre and Cushing and another couple guys. I honestly wasn't staring at Cushing the whole time. Cushing and Andre were up front. A bunch of us former players were sitting like on the side, like around the middle. There was like the TV cameras in the back, the other media to the left as you're facing the stage. And then Cal in his Texas boots on the audience's left, stage right. DeMeco in the center looking very dapper in a very nice suit. And then Nick Caserio to DeMeco's left, just absolutely beaming the whole time. And looking like, okay, we're finally here somewhere where we're gonna have a great press conference. Nick's not gonna have to answer any questions tomorrow from Sean and I about him saying things like, hey, he'll leave if the good quarterback if they don't hire the right guy. He spent the last time he was on us, and he's gonna be on with us tomorrow at 7:30. The last time he was on with us, he spent a good let's see, Seth Payne, see the tweet Trey Lance popped off. Any possible chance he comes to Houston? Ooh, did Trey Lance say something about DeMeco? I'll tell you, that's an interesting one. All right, my faith is tested. Nope, I'm out on everybody. They can't bring Trey Lance in here. I'm done with all of them. No, if DeMeco says to bring Trey Lance here, I will say, yes, DeMeco, I understand. I am in that mode right now. But as far as Trey Lance and the potential prospect goes, this, I will get genuinely excited about this. DeMeco specifically referenced having to play with whichever quarterback is available to you. This year in San Francisco, they made it to where they did and ended up playing their final game of the season with an injured third-string quarterback who was only playing because the fourth-string quarterback was banged up. And that's, he wasn't going to make any excuses, obviously. They weren't going to beat the Philadelphia Eagles with that squad at that point. But I do very much think that they went into that game with Brock Purdy as their quarterback, expecting to win with a 7th round, 6th round, whatever he was, a late round pick, rookie. They expected to win that game. So it's not just lip service with them. I think they probably feel like they can do a lot with a lot of these guys. Yeah, Eastside Herald says San Francisco is going to want something for Trey. Good point. Very good point. And I think ultimately it's probably going to be more than what the Texans want to pay. And my one rule in life, I don't follow any other rule other than this. If Kyle Shanahan wants to trade a quarterback away, there's a good chance that that quarterback has had whatever is in him taken out of him, and that's it. Because I don't think you can't fall prey to hubris and think that you're going to get more out of a quarterback than Kyle Shanahan did. So I think if Trey Lance is good, then I think that the 49ers aren't going to trade Trey Lance. So, and I think he said that he doesn't expect Garoppolo to be there. I think they really like Brock Purdy. I like some of the things Brock Purdy has done, but you got to look at some of his performances. Some of those games, I mean, they were masterpieces where guys were getting 10 yards run after the catch on average. Like Deebo Samuel would catch the ball over the middle. They would throw short of the sticks. Like they would make an easy throw short of the sticks on 3rd down, and then Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel over and over and over again on routes over the middle would just drag people for first downs. They would set up shot plays by using the run. Brock Purdy did some really good things, but a lot of that was also made to look better by playing in that offense with Kyle Shanahan as their offensive coordinator. But all right, let's see. I think I've covered, diversity and experience. That was really important, interesting. That was like a half hour ago, so I don't think some of you heard that. He was asked about his offensive staff, and instead of going into too many specifics about what type of offense he's going to run, he did mention, and I'm glad he did, because it's going to have me thinking a little bit differently about what type of offensive coordinator they need. Yes, he spent a lot of time in the Kubiak-Shanahan system, Kubishanistan, but he also played for Andy Reid and quizzed him and learned from him. He played for Chip Kelly. So that whole up-tempo, cutting edge at the time style of football for the NFL, but also he mentioned the sports science part of things. I think when asked about what type of staff he would want, aside from mentioning the guys from whom he learned, he also just said that he wants guys from different backgrounds, different levels of experience, all these different types. So like diversity and experience, because different players learn differently. And he very much kept coming back to that about how it's about teaching players, about helping players, about helping these guys become the best guy they are. And what did he say? You got to coach them hard and you got to love them hard. I think that's an old Bear Bryantism, but coach them hard, hug them hard, whatever it is. That you got to find that balance between coaching them really hard, but also really loving them. If you look at one of my YouTube shorts, I did a little thing on Lenore, the cornerback that DeMeco had given some really good advice to before a game. And after Lenore gets this interception in the playoffs, he comes to the sideline and gives DeMeco a huge hug. It's like everything that DeMeco is. It was really cool to see. So I do think with what he mentioned about Chip Kelly, I think all of the analytical stuff, all of the cutting edge sports science stuff, all of that stuff is going to continue to be developed with this team. And he's not some guy that thinks that, that it's got to be all about that. Obviously, he's got the balance in mind. But I think that the Texans are not going to be some backwards-ass hillbilly organization that doesn't go for these modern computers and football and stuff. I think it's going to be the right balance. And a lot of that, too. Okay, a lot of it. I think it should assuage some of your fears if you're somebody that's just nervous about a defensive-minded coach. I think that DeMeco, just in the way he talks about offense and the way he talks about being on the cutting edge of technology and sports science, I do not think this is going to be a defensive coach who never goes for it on 4th down. I do not think this is going to be all the hallmarks of a defensive coach who stymies a quarterback instead of helps him to develop. DeMeco is very much about getting the absolute most out of his players and helping them to be the best players they can be. And on the quarterbacking side of things, I think that factors into being aggressive, throwing downfield. None of those guys that he played for are afraid to be aggressive. BEAGG, bleepers. I almost swore. I'm trying not to. I had clicked the no profanity on this one, so I won't say the actual swear words. Please don't report me. Let's see. Nick, when asked about how the interview went, afterwards he said, what did we like? Everything. And he was gushing. DeMeco in that first interview saying, just putting it all out on the table and just saying, I want to be here. This is where I want to be. Think about this. Like, DeMeco's a guy who stopped taking interviews last year. This year, turned down 2 interviews. It doesn't look like, despite some, I think, pretty bogus reports out of Denver that somehow DeMeco was the favorite there. I think he may have been Denver's favorite at some point, certainly after Sean Payton said no go. So, but I don't think the Texans were ever at risk of losing DeMeco Ryans unless they would have tried to lowball him or something. And I think Cal understands the situation enough to know that it was not time to be lowballing anybody. And this is why you have an agent too. I think if DeMeco's agent was sitting on that call and DeMeco flat out said, look, I don't want to go anywhere else. I want to be right there with you guys. That's my dream job. His agent was probably like, oh, just give him a little something, like a little bit of hesitation. You're kind of a hot commodity here, DeMeco. You're kind of the big name. Just make it easier for me. I think the biggest thing about all this is the head coach and GM get along, something I don't ever remember. What do you think? Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that Dom Capers and Charlie Casserly got along really well, almost to the point where it was a detriment, because I don't know if they saw eye to eye completely when it came to like the philosophy of building a football team. And yet they're both super decent dudes that I wonder how much they actually butted heads in a productive way. Brian Billick would call it scrimmaging, I think. He and Ozzie Newsome used to scrimmage when they would disagree about something. They just go back and forth, and then you argue a little bit later, and you think of something else, and you call them up at 2 in the morning. You're like, no, we need to do it this way. So they would call it scrimmaging. I always wondered whether Dom and Casserly had that kind of a relationship. I do think that DeMeco, one of my questions about DeMeco, when I was trying to be as honest with myself as possible and shoot holes in my own arguments, my question was like, okay, is DeMeco, for lack of a better word, like, is he a jerk enough? And my short answer to that is yes. What's a better word than jerk? Assertive or decisive enough to make the unpopular decision? That would be a willingness to be unpopular. I think he is somebody who's always singularly focused on what's best for the team. And, any of you guys who are managers or coaches or anything out there know that after a while, it's easy to make sometimes the unpopular decisions because you're so guided by what the right thing to do for the team is. And it's one thing. I'd be a horrible head coach. I'm a mess. Sometimes I'm a jerk. Sometimes I'm too nice. But it's never the right blend. And I feel like DeMeco is the right blend of all those things. And I do think that Caserio and DeMeco it's hard to explain to you. And I don't mean to try to make this into some kind of uncomfortable romantic analogy, even though that's kind of my shtick, but only for people I don't like. I think it is almost like when you see 2 people that have a chemistry with each other, when you see a couple that, so on the romantic side of things, when you see a couple that you're like, oh, well, those 2 are just made for each other. Look at that. They're just so happy. And it's not just like some puppy dog love type of thing. They're just that kind of couple that vibes. So on the professional side of things, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. That's God, my God. If it could be Berkshire Hathaway, then maybe that's what it is. Is it Charlie Munger? Somebody tell me if I'm wrong there. So Warren Buffett, who many of you know, and Munger, who's been his longtime business partner, but isn't as front and center and high profile. They met when they were younger businessmen, in their 30s, and they just hit it off. They just vibed. And I think that's kind of the impression that we got from Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans today. Somebody asked him, I believe it was Brooks Cabina, asked DeMeco about his exposure to first-time coaches and Bert and Ernie too. Good, yes, Bert and Ernie, 100%. Hi, James. And so Kubiak, Brooks Cabina asked about his exposure to first-time head coaches because Kubiak, whatever I just said, it didn't sound like it made sense. DeMeco said he had his first-time head coach with Kubiak. Chip Kelly was the first-time head coach there, and then Kyle Shanahan was the first-time head coach. That's when DeMeco started talking about his experience with the various coaches. He didn't really address the first time part. I am curious about the conversations he may have had with Kyle Shanahan, because remember, when Kyle Shanahan was hired by the 49ers, they had just fired 2 head coaches in a row. They had Jim Tom Sula, who was a lot like David Culley in a lot of ways. And then they fired Chip Kelly, which was a lot different than Lovie Smith in a lot of ways. But it was a disaster. It was a mess. Who would take that job? Kyle Shanahan took it partly because they offered him a 6-year contract, and they knew they were in it for the long haul. And then they hired John Lynch, which was way outside the box thinking, but he got a 6-year contract too. In the 6-year contract, look, we know that these owners aren't beholden to those contracts and they bail on them all the time. But there is a big difference between a 3 or 4 year contract and then a 6-year contract and whatever financial commitment it was. Not to mention, this is the first time that it just feels like, yeah, this is the guy they wanted. They were almost kind of in shock that he wanted them as much as they wanted him. And it was just really, really cool. Let's see. Some of you might not have heard the story that that Caserio told about how when they got off the phone with DeMeco, the interview went incredibly well. DeMeco flat out said, I want to be there. Caserio got off the Zoom call and said, let's go play football, because it was that motivational. I felt that way a couple times during this press conference. And then they couldn't talk to him for a week, because those were the rules. So they couldn't talk to DeMeco basically after they decided, okay, yeah, this is the guy that we want, right? Yeah, we're on board, right? Okay, cool. Radio silence for a week. Like he's going around the dark side of the moon in one of the Apollo capsules. You just lose all contact. And you got to sit there and watch him on television and hope that he hasn't changed his mind. And that part, so you think about that. That was when DeMeco had canceled the other 2 interviews. And he just wanted to dial in. And I feel like people in San Francisco should feel good about that like there was no loss of concentration by DeMeco Ryans, because he was completely and totally focused on just circling back up with the Texans and coming to Houston when he was done with it. I don't know. I'm sure agents talk and you're allowed to do whatever you do, but not actually being able to have any time. Nick probably felt the way DeMeco said he felt, which is like right now, DeMeco just can't wait to DeMeco just said, you can't wait to. This guy sucks, man. We've been going too long. I'm getting a little distracted now. DeMeco is saying he can't wait to start coaching football, like right now. And seeing the guys in the back of the room. He saw some of the active players in the back of the room. Derek Stingley was in there. Was Derek Stingley excited? I can only presume so. He never shows any facial expression whatsoever, but he was there. He was there. And I think a lot of those guys were really excited. Kenyon Green was there, a few other guys. And I think that those guys are on board, and I was glad to see some of the young guys get to see DeMeco in person and kind of understand, okay, this is whatever guys have said about DeMeco, it's true. This is the guy. You can tell he's as authentic as they come. He is the real deal. He's going to get the best out of you. And some of the best coaches I've ever had, it's amazing. The guys that you really love as a coach, like whether they're hard asses, whether they're players guys, whoever they might be, they are guys that you can tell they genuinely care about you. And that's the really cool thing about DeMeco. I think that like he genuinely, his whole MO is to help guys get better. He talked about, when he was a player, one of the things where he realized he wanted to get into coaching was when he was a player and Brian Cushing got drafted and came in. Like with some players, there's some guys in the NFL, guys like Brian Cox. I remember stories about him like not talking to rookie linebackers at all because he viewed them as competition until training camp was over. But DeMeco said, hey, his job was to help Cushing become the absolute best player that he could be. And then by way of that, then DeMeco's going to be a better football player because the guy next to him is better, and the team's going to be better, and that's better for everybody. And he did the same thing when he went to Philadelphia with Jordan Hicks. He said he's going to pour himself into that guy and just make that his focus. So with him, it feels like coaching is much more just like it's his actual normal personality manifesting itself. And that's what he's going to do. Somebody said, I wonder if Kafka's going to be annoyed when when he finds out that they were totally interested in DeMeco the whole time. I doubt it because they still have to, you always have to have like 5 guys lined up because you never know what's going to happen. Somebody asked if I think Brandon Cooks will stick around. I think there's a much better chance that he'll stick around now. I think that somebody said, what do you think about Kenyon Green seeing all the 59 jerseys? That's a good point. Landry's got a good theory about this. You should tune into Landry tomorrow on In the Loop at 10 a.m. because he has a theory about the number 59 and whether Kenyon Green should keep it or not. So as far as Brandon Cooks, I think that for one, look, Brandon Cooks has shown that he's very sensitive to his environment and it makes him either happy or it gives him the cold pricklies. I think this will be a warm, fuzzy environment for him. He's also, though, at that stage in his career when if his production starts to drop off, I can totally see him lashing out and blaming others for it and making himself a difficult guy to be around again. And that's the risk you run. So I don't know. That's going to be a really interesting conversation because Cooks was a guy who was heralded and held up and propped up as a guy that, was somebody to emulate. And then he became the exact opposite. When things got really tough or not as he had planned, he wanted the hell out and was very public about it and pouty about it and lost his captaincy. So that's a tough one to deal with because, look, you trade him, it's a big cap hit, versus if you keep him and he's on board, then, man, you can get some good play out of him and he can help bring those younger guys along. But it also, is it a rebuild? Does Cooks believe that it's a rebuild or not? We just don't know at this point. So too early to see, but I think that somebody else asked if I want to be on the staff. No, I don't. I don't want to coach. I'm not a coach. I'm good at clinics and episodically, but I'm not wired to be a coach. My attention span is too short, and I get too restless. So I'm not I can't handle long meetings to begin with. So to have nothing but a string of long meetings and working with things that are frustrating, like the number one ability that coaches have is to just not stop chipping away at the same problem until it's fixed. And I'm more like, I'll work on that for a while, then I'm going to go back over here, and then I'll get back to this eventually. So it doesn't really intrigue me. Thank you for asking, though. I appreciate that so many people would recommend me to do it or try it. And let's see. Will he call plays? We're not sure yet. And DeMeco himself said that they're still talking about that's not something that they know for sure exactly what they're going to do. The other things... Okay. Let's see. Cooks is a LBP. What's that mean? LBP? LPB? I don't know what that means. The BFF, we got into an argument earlier. We talked about earlier whether Dameon Pierce would think that he was DeMeco Ryan's BFF or whether Nick Caserio is actually going to be the BFF. And I think that a lot of people will feel like that. I think Dameon Pierce and DeMeco Ryan's are made for each other. DeMeco Ryan's is going to absolutely love Dameon Pierce because he's one of those guys where this year you felt like this is exactly like the kind of guy you want. And Marcus Spears really made a good point when he talked about this team, even at the end of the year when everything was such a mess. They were still fighting hard. They were down to the wire with Kansas City. They were down to the wire with the Cowboys. They won a game that they shouldn't have won. Oh, yeah, and I told you guys I was going to address that. So I think that Caserio did a good job of drafting the right kind of football character guys. And I think DeMeco is going to do a lot with those guys. And Caserio, if some of you might have missed the news, Caserio, who will be on with us at 7:30 tomorrow morning on Sports Radio 610, said that it looks like there's a good chance that John Metchie will be good to go for training camp. So the cancer treatments have gone well, obviously, and he's in incredible shape. Caserio said he looks better now than he did coming out as a senior. And, who knows, how long maybe perhaps the cancer had been. Oh, boy, I didn't even think of that. Now I'm getting greedy. Because I'm thinking about okay, well, if Metchie had been maybe slowed down by cancer a little bit and was still putting out those efforts that he was putting out, it's too much. I'm too greedy there. As far as Lovie Smith goes, I think that Shannon Sharp has been very entertaining in talking about how Lovie Smith gave the finger to the Texans with going for it on two. Somebody says trade Cooks for picks, easy as that. There's still a cap hit, but you're right. Then you're like buying those picks. Okay, cool. I like your idea, Adam. So Shannon Sharp has been very entertaining in saying that Lovie Smith was giving the finger to the Texans by going for two and winning that game at the end. For one, look, you still had to go into overtime after that. And it's not like Lovie Smith was trying to lose the game in the 59 minutes leading up to that spot. But I also do think it's a bit disrespectful to Lovie Smith that somehow he would have been doing that just as a way to give the bird to the Texans. Like, I think the simplest answer is usually the best answer, which is he was trying to win the football game. That owners, who, by the way, like the Texans, let's remember, were named in that Brian Flores lawsuit. And one of Brian Flores' complaints of when he was with the Dolphins was that the owner had told him to lose football games. So I don't think the Texans were in any kind of position to say, hey, Lovie Smith, I want you to not try to win this football game, which would have also included kicking that extra point and then somehow going out and tanking the fifth quarter overtime somehow. And so it's disrespectful to Lovie Smith. He wasn't trying to say bleep you to anybody. He was just trying to win a football game, which is, I'm told that was basically clarified to him before the game that that's what you go out and win it, man. Just go out and win it. So some of those theories I feel are disrespectful to Lovie Smith. I thought that DeMeco did a good job of showing respect to guys like Lovie Smith and David Culley. He mentioned multiple times the various coaches that he's following. When asked about being one of the few black coaches in the NFL, he gave credit to and thanked the coaches that had come before him in that regard as well. He didn't really address a lot of that head on. He was asked about making the decision to come here despite some of the adversity or the situations the Texans had been in before. And again, I don't think he addressed anything specifically about that. Somebody asked if I would go for Tony Pollard. I don't think he's like Christian No, if you're in the if you need him for a playoff run, then by all means, but I'm not going to trade for a veteran running back. It's just rife with too many, not for a team that's in the situation they are right now. This is a time for youth. This is a time for trying to find another Dameon Pierce or two in the draft along the way, that type of thing, than it is for trading for veteran running backs. He said it was an honor to follow those coaches. I think I've hit everything. I like my favorite phrase of the evening was in talking about what happens when your quarterback gets injured. He said, like, what are you going to do? You're just going to book it? Like, no, you're not going to book it, as in just running away. And I liked it just because I don't know if I haven't heard that term in a while. And it felt kind of old school. He talked about his family, and that was cool. I thought that he spoke about his wife for a while. I couldn't see her face because she was down front, but it sounded like it looked like from his facial expression that she was getting embarrassed because he was speaking so glowingly about her, and then about his three kids. It's a really beautiful family. If you just Google DeMeco Ryan's family, they all look like him. They all just look like a genuinely nice person, and that's a cool thing to be. Let's see, a tribute. 315. Oh yeah, the question I had at the beginning. Black Eighth Element says he killed the presser. I was clapping at home listening. Oh, Pollard's a free agent. That's right. Yeah. We can't get into a Pollard discussion right now, guys. Cowboys did him dirty contract-wise. Would you ever call Gary Kubiak for offensive consultant, if not OC job? I very much think that he could call Kubiak as a consultant, whether Kubiak is like even a consultant for the offense or the defense. A lot of what teams will do now is some teams call it a red team, which is people who specifically try to poke holes in your game plan. It goes back to the Cold War when in the U.S. military might have a mission, and then they'd have a red team that's supposed to be like the Soviets. But it's their own guys. They'll try to say like, okay, well, this is how I would respond to that mission. So you're kind of scrimmaging, virtually against somebody. So Gary's great in that regard, would be somebody to kind of scheme against almost and ask him how he would do that. Obviously have a lot of advice for everything. Dom Capers was a consultant out in Denver this year for Ejiro Evero, who's a first-year defensive coordinator, and they did a very good job on defense this year. I think that having somebody like that, especially a guy like Dom or Kubiak, who are like so fatherly, just kind of wise and calm, almost like a favored older professor at this point. I think they would like that a lot. I'm pretty sure Kubiak's not interested in being a defensive coordinator. Of course, now he'd be, be at home, all that stuff. I don't know. We'll see. One thing he said about the offense was he wants to own the line of scrimmage, operate with play action pass. Caserio talked about using deception a lot, which is a hallmark of that's just a hallmark of good defense or good offense. I thought that DeMeco did a great job as a defensive coordinator, really disguising his coverages, timing blitzes really well, which is a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of discipline. Somebody must have mentioned Vic Fangio because he officially got the job for DC in Miami. Somebody else asked which players were in attendance. I'll say, let's see, Whitney Merciless, John Weeks, who a lot of us old guys forgot wasn't actually like a retired player, because when we got up for pictures at the end, first they did the active players, and John Weeks got up, and a bunch of us looked at him and was like, how come John Weeks is getting up there? He's one of us. And then he stuck around for the picture with the older players too, the retired players. Let's see, Fred Weary sat in front of me. Mike Quinn, the old quarterback from way back in the day, was down a couple. Cushing, Kevin Walter, Andre Johnson, bunch of those guys. And I'm going to go, there's a party for the former players that was in the locker room that it was probably over like a half hour ago, but I'm going to try to see if I can get down there and at least get some free food. 7:30 tomorrow morning, Nick Caserio will be on our show on Sports Radio 610, and you should tune in every morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's a different vibe these days, man. I'm so happy, and I'll say it once again, I am so confident this is going to work out. If it doesn't, I will leave my sports radio job, and I love my sports radio job. That's how confident I am. From this moment forward, I am a beacon of light and a force of good and all that is right in Houston, Texansville. And any of my criticisms will be 100% about just trying to help the team improve and give my advice for what I think they need to do. Because, man, he's got it. He's just got it. And I'm glad so many of you could see the press conference and understand it. And for the first time in a long time, feel a good vibe about this team. It was, because when the Astros did it, they kind of snuck up on us, didn't they? They did it. Now I'm going to talk myself into being nervous about everything because the Astros snuck up on us. The Astros, it's an IWC, Joseph. It's from Zadok Jewelers. Yeah. The Astros snuck up on us in 2015, where we knew at some point it might be all right, and but then all of a sudden, midway through 2015, it really started to click, and then they pulled back a little bit, but at least you knew they were a solid baseball team. But then 2017, it wasn't an outright ambush at that point. They'd been good for a couple of years, or at least not awful for a couple of years. Astros is a different animal. They are Astros versus the whole MLB team. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, no, listen, I am not trying to turn this into a football town versus baseball town argument or anything like that. We're the fourth damn biggest city in the country, okay? We are I hope our sports teams do well town. And you will be Astros fans for life, because this is what happens when people age 6 through 25, especially, I think, follow a multiple championship team. You get it emblazoned in your brain because your brain is still developing. I feel it might also somehow be passed down genetically after that through gene expression. So it's just some mumbo jumbo that I've read in headlines elsewhere. But there's something about that, and that's our kids and grandkids will be those super annoying fans who can't even explain why they're fans. We all have stories about when and don't get me wrong, I know a lot of you are huge Astros fans from way back in the day. It's just, but in terms of an entire city, it really grabbing an entire city, it takes those multiple championships to do that. I think that's what happened. Once upon a time, it happened in Dallas. Once upon a time, it happened in Pittsburgh. Once upon a time, it happened in San Francisco. And then it becomes like a collective. And I think that's what we have with the Astros now. We've obviously never had it with NFL football in Houston. So if it's going to happen, I will be completely unsurprised if it happens with DeMeco Ryan's at the helm. So I'll see everybody at 6 a.m. tomorrow, but 7:30 if you want to hear Nick Caserio. I'm really looking forward to that with Sean Pendergast. Awesome, guys. Thanks. I'm going to bust this place up. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, if the party's over, I might not be able to get out of the stadium. But there's a monster truck. Look, monster trucks. Hold on. Can you see? Look at that. Huh. Look at the little, and Cal, you guys, I showed you that, I tweeted out a picture of Cal in the monster truck the other day, and I think a lot of you thought that it was photoshopped or something, but it's not. So, that security guy is probably going to see me, that there's not supposed to be somebody up here. What are they going to do? They're not going to arrest me. They're just going to escort me out. Everything's cool right now. And then I'll just be like, hey, I know DeMeco Ryans. Hey, I yelled at DeMeco Ryans when he couldn't get the call out in the huddle when he was a rookie. I run this joint. All right, everybody. I'll see you.